came in through Stanford.
Welcome to our coverage of ASUG Annual Conference and Sapphire Now 2014. We're in the ASUG News Studio, sponsored by NTT Data. And right now we're going to talk about something that's pretty hot, mobile field service. And joining me are two wonderful customers and ASUG members, Eric Halber from Wood Grain Millwork and Kevin Frazier from Ernst & Young. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon.
Yeah, no problem.
Is everyone having a great show?
Yeah,
Always.
It's been really great.
All right, awesome. Well, let's dive into the use cases here. So what's interesting and why I had you together is because you're both doing a field service project, but you're both doing it with different parts of the SAP suite. So Eric, let's start with you. What are you using and what's the use case?
Sure, yeah. So our journey into mobility was really customer driven. I mean, we were challenged by one of our distribution customers to create a field service application that would provide them with a very clear output for credit. So credit's coming back to us. And our field service representatives go in there, they tidy up the shelves, they take care of warped products, a scrapped product, cut down product. Customers can actually go into this big box location, cut off a piece of lumber, and then we give a credit back to the store for that. That was all done by paper before, manually summed up, handwritten notes, and our mobility application allows us to go in and do that process in much less time and produce a really clear output now for the customer.
And what exactly are you using to accomplish that from SAP?
Yep, so we're actually using the gateway component is one of the components we're using. In our case, other than core ECC, where a lot of the data is stored and the master data is coming from for the application, most of the other components are more open source, so like Apache Cordova. We're using iOS development tools to do the development, kind of while we were waiting for SMP 3.0 or later versions to come out, and then we'll be looking harder at those SAP components in total, rather than just leveraging a few of the components, let's say.
Awesome, so a paper-based process, totally mobilized now, that's really exciting.
Yep.
Kevin, talk to me about your use case and what you're using.
We're very similar. Of course, with Ernst & Young, we have a advisory group that's never in an office, always on the road. So having the, actually being able to work from a mobile environment is critical to us. And we look at the same thing from a customer perspective. How can we enable the people who are actually out working with the customers and our clients on a day-to-day basis, give them an access to be able to go in and do things, billings, things like that, client account information, and look at everything that they need to for an account and manage it from either an iPhone, an iPad, or a tablet, versus being able to connect from an office, because guess what? Most of the time we're not at an office.
Right.
And same thing too, we have a ECC backend for SAP with a NetWeaver gateway in the middle. And we are using actually the SAP Fiori suite, some of it out of the box, some tweaked and customized, like the time and expense that we can manage, and some custom development within the Fiori platform for doing some additional things for around billings and client management.
So you're doing pretty much everything. That's so interesting. Even customizing the Fiori apps.
Yes. And from a standpoint, it comes out of the box. There are things that you can do from a look and feel. And I will say one of the things that we really focused on heavily was not just replicating an SAP transaction in the front end, but how do you actually focus on the user interface for the person? So for example, if you had to move costs from one project to another, in SAP, you're doing a transaction to physically move it from one, then you actually get it out of one, post it in another. It's multiple steps. We wanted to wear a standpoint where somebody could click and drag and say, I want to get down to what they're trying to do, which is move it from here to there. If that generates 3 or 4 transactions in the back end, we created focused on the interface to be simple and made the complexity in the back end to actually generate all the associated transactions to that particular thing that we were trying to do.
Now, making it simple on the front end, is that something that helped with adoption? Can you talk to that point for me, Eric?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, not to steal too much from the keynote or what Kevin said, but essentially that's what we did too. I mean, when we rolled out our application, we kept it simple. We were under a very tight time frame, so essentially around 10 weeks is our rollout time frame for the application. keeping the screen elements kind of consistent with other iOS applications in this case really helped out with the user adoption. One other thing that we did is we really tried to get in the hands of these FSRs the phones ahead of time. A lot of them had flip phones, or maybe they were used to more of a Droid platform, so that they could learn the iOS platform before they actually had to migrate over to our application, which was highly based on the same screen elements, so it really drove the adoption. And not a lot of different, let's say, selections. It was very simple for them to use the application. The training was a real breeze to roll out. Some of it was done very virtual because these FSRs are all over the place. We actually have about 100 servicing 600 different store locations. And so that made that rollout quite simple.
Wow, that's great. And I mean, you can't underestimate that, because this was guys doing stuff on paper, so you had to make it as easy as possible for them to pick it up.
Yep, exactly right.
What about, what did you find in terms of adoption,
Well,
Kevin?
we are in our pilot now, and I think some of the key learnings, our initial look at when we rolled things out in an early thing was it wasn't easy enough, so we actually went back and really focused on the user interface. Now, probably our biggest problem is just trying to throttle everyone back, going, this is what we built so far. I know you have a lot more things now that you've seen this that we could do, but give us a chance to get through this. So I'd say we've kind of shifted from, adoption to throttling back.
Okay.
Hold your horses. So. Yep.
That's an interesting point to bring up, because that's one of the biggest challenges that I hear from users is just prioritizing everything that comes in. Could you share a little bit of your advice for that?
Yeah, sure. We had the same problem. Again, just try to squeeze everything into 10 weeks. I mean, we had some image capture that people wanted to do. We had some geolocation that people wanted to do. And at the end of the day, again, it was focusing on really what the base requirements were. What was the customer asking for? What did we need for the FSR to do their job? And then we really broke that into a phase 2. And so now we're talking about that. And I think the cool part about the SAP platform and the components that we use, we're also talking about things like how do we manage FSR tasks, things unrelated to the scrapping, the culling process that we built this application for. But the platform is there. We can easily build on top of it.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and we did two things. We looked at one, obviously client-facing first. How do you make the client happier? If it means getting billing more accurate, things like that, that was key. And the other thing was really around where we noticed in our processes we had delays. Things that, timesheets, billing,
right.
Activity, learning events, all the activities where we are waiting for approvals, things like that. We really focused on what can we do to get these processes enabled and in front of people so they can actually do them very quickly while they're sitting in a meeting. And even if we're not at a client, you're in sometimes meetings, you're not at a desk.
Right.
So it's very easy to be able to pull up an iPad and get continue a process going versus being there for 3 hours while that process idles. So for us, we looked at two things. What can we do to improve our client service? And two, how do we actually speed up things that are actually just sitting and idling quite often?
And that's a great point. Actually just leveraging the data and looking at the process to see where the hang-ups are and everything is really a great place to start with this. Now let's close out by talking a little bit about the benefits of these projects. What have you seen come through so far?
Sure. For us, it's been about the data. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning that the requirements were very customer-driven, all about giving them a nice piece of output, essentially. And we knew kind of on the back end that we were going to be able to collect a little bit more data than what we did before. Everything was summarized, coming in these summarized credits before, but now we can really start to look at why was this particular piece scrapped? How much of it was scrapped at what locations? And so the real ROI we see here is that we can kind of change our selling strategy. We can run some events to figure out why certain damaged product is maybe coming from a particular location. And so for us, it was a big win on the customer side, but this data is really going to be invaluable to us.
Yeah, the data is really
that wouldn't have been possible
goal.
With the paper process.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about you, Kevin?
For us, there's a couple of things. One, we did have a lot of people in the back end because people didn't have access to the system, would be calling, getting reports, getting things emailed out to them. The amount of time and energy that was going on across all the professionals, 175,000 people worldwide, that is a lot of people supporting that. So our costs were going up with just having people to support it. By making it have people empowered to go get the data themselves and actually manipulate and change it was a big thing. Standardizing how we did stuff enabled us to actually get things more into a shared service organization. So we had really on a finance back-end support, there was a lot of cost savings. And then two, just being able people process stuff timely. Missed timesheets, things like that means they don't make the billing cycles and things. You have to go back. By enabling people to do things right away and not have that delay, we had more accurate data, not just access to it. So I think we had the two things, access and the cost of getting to the data, and two, when we finally got it, it was a lot more accurate, and we could do something with it.
That's fantastic, and it really rings true with the theme we've been hearing all week, right? You put the work in. Simplification is hard, but the payoff is.
Yeah, so for us, it's all about. It's not so much even just the software; it's how we did the processes around it, the UI on top of it, and redesigning all of that was the key. I think if we had just taken our existing world and just put it in a mobile platform, we would not have seen the benefits that we've seen so far.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, one of the things that our partner that we use brought to us was really that UI design or UX design. I think is really important in these mobile apps. As you say, don't try to take the process that you have. We didn't try to replicate that piece of paper onto the mobile. We really changed it to make it a lot simpler for the FSR.
Fantastic advice, and thank you for sharing your stories and your successes and all these tips that will help make our customers' projects so much easier.
Yeah,
thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining us for our coverage of ASUG Annual Conference in Sapphire Now 2014. You can find more SAP news on asugnews.com.